that's why I want to do it. It is about food, but it's more so about community. And I think that we're missing that as a society now.
You're listening to the Good Dirt Podcast. This is a place where we dig into the nitty-gritty of sustainable living through food, fashion, and lifestyle.
And we're your hosts, Mary and Emma Kingsley, the mother and daughter founder team of Lady Farmer. We're sowing seeds of slow living through our community platform, events, and online marketplace.
We started this podcast as a means to share the wealth of information and quality conversations that we're having in our world as we dream up and deliver ways for each of us to live into the new paradigm, one that is regenerative, balanced, and whole.
We want to put the microphone in front of the voices that need to be heard the most right now, the farmers, the dreamers, the designers, and the doers.
So come cultivate a better world with us. We're so glad you're here. Now, let's dig in.
Hi, Emma. Let's talk about our upcoming retreat.
I'd love to. Our second annual virtual online slow living retreat is coming up. It's a little later this year. It will be in December, the very first weekend of December. And we have just a really wonderful panel of workshop leaders and activities planned. And the theme will be about embracing winter. So we'll be kind of coming off of Thanksgiving, moving into those holiday times. And, you know, it's another weird year. And we'll relish the opportunity of coming all together and learning from each other. We have 3 amazing workshops. One with Eva of Eva Cosmos Flores on Instagram. These are all past Good Dirt guests, by the way. So Good Dirt listeners, you will know these people well. Eva is teaching a class on intentional design for slow living. So excited about that one. Kirsten Shockey, our fermentation queen, is teaching us a class on how to make fermented gifts to share for the holidays. So that's very timely. And Christy Johnson is teaching us an embroidery class, how to embroider our own stitch wishes, embroidered talismans, sort of mindfully making and mending and artfully doing those things. We also have a yoga class. You and I will be hosting a coffee chat, and we will be hosting a community happy hour for you to meet other Lady Farmers and Good Dirt listeners, and with a special musical guest, Eliza Blue, who is also a Good Dirt podcast guest, will be coming on and sharing some stories and songs with us. So you really do not want to miss it. You can register on our website. Get your tickets now. It seems like it's far away, but it's not, and tickets are limited, so you want to be there.
Yeah, really excited. I do always love our retreats. This will be our 4th Lady Farmer retreat. We had 2 in person, and then with COVID last year, it was virtual, and again, virtual this year. Both are wonderful, and we hope to see all of you there. That would be great. But on another topic, Emma, what did you think about social media going down this week?
I loved it. I wish social media would go down forever.
I know.
What were you doing?
I was actually outside in the yard. I was tending to my dye pots on the fire pit. The weather's been so beautiful. I've been doing some of that outside. It's really fun. I was doing some bundle dyeing, and I was thinking I should probably be taking pictures and posting the process because, of course, that's something that might be of interest to some of our followers. But I couldn't get it to work, and I reached out to you in frustration, like, can you help me with this? And then you told me it was down.
Yeah, I was spending way too much time on social media because I've been sick the past few days, unable to do much except stare on my phone. Well, you know what? That's a story I'm telling myself. Probably could have done more, but I mean, I was sick, so. And I was just so glad that I had that built-in buffer because, you know, it's easy to spend too much time on social media. Anyways, we were both so happy. And it's been interesting to talk to others about it too, because I think that was generally a shared experience among most people.
Yeah, and that's the reason I'm even talking about it. It's interesting. Like, for some reason, I had this feeling of this sort of sense of freedom because I actually couldn't post what I was doing, and I could actually just enjoy doing it. And then I realized how ridiculous that was, and it struck me as meaningful. Really quite meaningful. And it occurred to me that I should explore this some more. It feels really important. You know what I mean?
Definitely. Kind of how we're all just players in this system that none of us are really happy with. I don't know. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously, we've had this conversation on this podcast a lot.
Yeah.
We do talk about social media a lot. There's a great episode with Marley Grace where we talk about it specifically, but it's just we're participating in this system. And another thing we talk about a lot at Lady Farmer is systems that we're a part of, that the industry between us and our daily needs. And it's almost like social media is the next version of that. You know, we have industrial food, we have the industrial clothing, we have industrial building that build our houses. And now with social media, it really is this industry of connection, I guess, and attention. And it's just so important to be aware of that. And yes, we definitely, it's all personal responsibility. We play, you know, we decide how much we want to participate in all of that. But I will also argue that the way that our world is, and the systems that there are, sometimes there's just not a way around it. You know, I mean, if we want to reach people, we do that on social media. What would Lady Farmer be without social media? I don't know. It's so crazy to think about.
Yeah, and the other thing is, it's interesting how the whole thing ties in with the conversation that we had with our guest, Kayla Lobermeier of Under a Tin Roof. And she is on to talk to us about living a wholesome, simple, historical life through the seasons. But we really got into the conversation about social media as well. It's very interesting. It just turns up this week.
Yeah, it's funny. As someone who talks and lives and exemplifies historical living, you will let her talk about it. But she's like, but my life is all online. It's funny. So Under a Tin Roof was founded by Kayla and her mother, Jill. And it has been many things, including a flower farm, homesteading blog, a shop that sells handmade goods, and, as you'll hear about in this episode, soon to be a food truck.
Kayla is such an inspiration when it comes to slow living. She offers historically based country recipes, instructions on growing and preserving your own food, herbal remedies, and home goods. And I just love looking at her website and all the dreamy pictures of Kayla wandering through her gardens in historical clothing. And she's playing with her children, or she's in her kitchen working on any of her amazing culinary creations. She's a wonderful cook.
Yeah, she's such a joy to talk to. We covered so much in this conversation, from homesteading history to the demands of running a small digital business based on your personal lifestyle. And this really resonated with us, and we appreciated Kayla's willingness and candor in talking about this intersection of lifestyle, home business, and the role that social media plays in bringing all that together.
Which is why this week's social media outage and its revelations seem like the perfect parallel to our discussion today. And it's also a good opportunity to remind our listeners about the Almanac, which is our own private Lady Farmer online community that we think offers so many of the benefits of social media without the setbacks.
Totally. I love it. And I'm so obsessed with the Almanac and the fact that we have it. And it's almost like we knew, Mom.
Yeah. We're ahead of the curve.
Yeah. We just created this space. We wanted to have a community space for Lady Farmers and Good Dirt listeners that was not reliant on social media. So actually, for anyone who's interested, full transparency, the Almanac is hosted on a platform called Mighty Networks, which is a great company, women-run, women-led. I love it. And their whole mission is data privacy and connecting communities. And there's a lot of great communities you can be a part of on Mighty Networks, but the Almanac is one of them, and we love it. And so on Monday, when most of my other apps weren't working, Mighty Networks app was, and I could get into the Almanac and I could peruse, pictures people were posting and think about some of the prompts we've been posting in there lately. So it's kind of cool because it scratches that itch of getting on your phone and connecting, but the content that you're absorbing is super intentional. It's not advertising, and you're connecting with like-minded people. You don't need to sift through and filter it anymore, and there's no crazy algorithm to it. It's what's posted there is what you see. So,
and the content is really curated towards specific interests.
Yeah, so we love the Almanac. It is open all the time. The first year that we ran it, we're just kind of getting up on that year mark now. We were opening it seasonally, and now it's open all the time. So join us anytime. It is affordable and amazing, and we want you there. Also, it's a great way to support this podcast because many podcasts you might listen to have a Patreon channel or rely on sponsorships. We're super picky about our sponsorships. You've heard a few sponsorships on here before, but we're not going to sell anything to you guys that we don't absolutely love and use ourselves. So the Almanac is a great way to support this podcast. Even if you don't think you'll use it as much, you can consider it that supporting the Good Dirt podcast if that's what you're into. Thank you so much. We couldn't do it without you.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you for those of you that are already members and supporting us, and thank you in advance to those that will join us, and we really appreciate it. And so now we'll let Kayla tell her story of Under a Tin Roof and about her life as a model of slow living, and as she has certainly demonstrated to us in this conversation and in her work, a domestic historian.
Yes, and now here's our domestic historian, Kayla Lobermeier.
So I'm Kayla Lobermeier. I got started with my business Under a Tin Roof, which is a whole lot of different things. First, it started off as a handmade business with my mom. She started her business back in, I believe it was 97, because I would have been 2 at the time. And she was a graphic designer and illustrator and would paint furniture. So she'd like go pick up a piece of furniture on the side of the road, bring it home, sand it all down, repaint it. And she did all of these really beautiful. So in shabby chic was kind of brand new. So drawers would have like stripes on them, and another drawer would have roses and just really beautiful stuff. And that was fun. And I would go to shows with her. And throughout the years, her business just changed a lot. And she made all sorts of different things. And by the time I joined on, she had a direct-to-garment printer and was making apparel. And same thing, still artistic, using a lot of her designs and things like that, and was selling on Etsy. And she was like, I think I really probably need a website. Can you help me with that? And I had my first son. I was a single mom. I was 20 years old. I was working in restaurants, and I knew how to do some web stuff. So I was like, yeah, that sounds good. And my original plan was to go to school as an English major, and I just did not end up going. And I was kind of debating, should I go back? Should I not? And she was like, well, you could just write a blog on the website and we'll see how it goes, and you can make money making stuff with me. So it's like, okay, I'll just try it. And it ended up working out really well. And we went to Country Living Fair for a few years. That was really fun. Met a lot of people there. And that's kind of how our Instagram following kind of got started, was we met a lot of people there and befriended them. And we were in the Beekmans, Josh and Brent. We went and did their show. And that was amazing. That was so fun.
Are they the Property Brothers? Wait, who are they?
It's Beekman 1802. They do like skincare products now, goat's milk.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, they had a TV show way back when. That's how we even knew who they were, a reality show.
And what was the show called?
It was called The Beekman Boys.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, check them out because they're hilarious. They're funny. So we did that, and the blog just kind of grew.
Mm-hmm.
I decided I wanted to try gardening in the backyard. So my dad and I put together this 1,300 square foot garden. He built a greenhouse out of reclaimed glass windows. I guess that also really propelled our social media forward. People just really like seeing that.
Yeah.
And wrote a lot about gardening, and we got chickens in the backyard. And yeah, I guess that's kind of just how everything got started. And I guess side note is I grew up in the Chicago suburbs. So no farming experience, nothing, very urban setting, I guess suburban setting, I should say. There's a big highway and it has every store you can think of on it, and everything's accessible. And when we moved here to Iowa, we live currently in a town that only has like 1,000 people in it. So it's really small, really rural. So big change for us. And yeah, so then we ended up finding a farm my parents did that was 3.5 acres. They bought that in December of 2017. I was still living with them at the time. And my friend, who they grow GAP certified pork and then pastured chicken and turkey, the garden I had grown in town was so big and produced so much stuff. I was giving it away to everybody. I had no use for all of this produce that was coming out of it. And she's like, you should start like a little CSA program and I'll put my meat in it. And I was like, okay, that sounds fun.
Wow.
And when we moved to the farm, we had a full acre that we could use to plant whatever we wanted in. So I just filled it with vegetables, and my mom grew some flowers, and we started a CSA program. And our first year we had 60 people that we were feeding.
Oh my gosh.
First year.
No joke.
Yeah, it was so overwhelming, and we didn't have our store yet. They converted the garage into a little farm store. So we were in the driveway with a tent, making it happen. We messed up so much, and I learned so much about growing vegetables. And we did that for a few years. And then when I got married in 2019, that was the last year we did vegetable CSA. And my mom, the following spring, was like, I think I just want to start doing flowers, because people would come to the farmer's market and just pass by. We aren't certified organic, but we grew everything organically.
Yeah.
The practices in mind, we were too small to get the certification. It wasn't worth it to us. But people would walk into our booth and pass up, $2 carton of heirloom tomatoes, but then they'd spend $16 on flowers. And the flowers were so much easier to grow physically, and just what we could get to produce out of it, and the crop was successful. So I was like, well, let's just move over to flowers, because we're losing a lot of money doing vegetables. Not really sure we're interested in doing CSA anymore, because it's a very unreliable business.
Yeah.
So moved into that. And then I kind of moved into doing what most people see online now, which is social media full time. So I write our blog, I write for a few magazines, I work with bulk canning, and that's kind of my main income for our family. Yeah, that's where Under a Tin Roof is at right now.
That is so many things under the tin roof.
Where did you come up with the name Under a Tin Roof? Cute.
Thanks. My mom and I, when we lived in town and had that first garden with the little greenhouse, there was a single car garage, just this little shacky building. And my dad, he builds everything for us. He's master builder, we call him, really good at that, and ended up converting it into a she shed for her.
Uh-huh.
So it was air conditioned and heated and had hardwood floors. It was so cute. Kind of had it as a studio and then a little store of sorts when we were living there. And it had a tin roof on it. So when we joined up together, her business was just Jillian Helped and Company for the longest time. And she's like, well, we probably need a new name, so it's not just me.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember sitting in a coffee shop and I said, well, why don't we do Under a Tin Roof, since we're making everything in the building under a tin roof?
So cute.
Yeah, that's different. And it's kind of lower on the alphabet when you get started. So
currently, is it still you and her or the business?
Yeah, technically we own the business. She just mainly grows the flowers and sells them. And that's her end of it. And then my end of it is keeping up with our online presence.
Another mother-daughter company.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. I almost want to interview you guys.
I know.
I think that's so fun.
Anywhere in all of this, was there an aha moment for you? I mean, you're obviously drawn to these traditional skills and the things that we would call slow living practices or slow living lifestyle. So somewhere along the line in all of this, was there something that drew you into that?
That was sort of the crux of your story, where you changed to homesteady type things. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So I can remember sitting in the studio with my mom, and she said, you should watch this documentary called Sustainable. It was on Netflix. It was lovely, and it followed this farmer through the seasons, and he was growing vegetables in a sustainable way and raising pigs on their farm. Just things that we had seen around us from the other farmers that were in the area that we just didn't understand necessarily, but we wanted to know more about it. So I watched that, and that just really sparked, like, I don't know where my food comes from. I want to know more about that. And I feel I'm almost silly and unknowledgeable about a lot of what I'm putting in my body and on my body and what I'm feeding my son. So yeah, the next spring, because that would have been either in the autumn or the winter before that idea sparked. It's like, I don't want to just go for it and try it and see what we can do. And we found out the town we lived in, you could have chickens in town. There weren't really any rules or city ordinances towards that. So we're like, okay, well, let's try it. And yeah, it just kind of kept rolling from there. Now that I live back in town again, I have a small garden. I ended up growing an entire acre of vegetables just a few years later.
It seems you came from a desire to really know more about where your food came from.
Yes, that was what initiated a lot of what we do now. Just understanding the entire cycle of the sustainable lifestyle. And eventually, that opened doors to other things like living with less waste and composting. I mean, mostly it's always been about food for me, if I'm going to be honest.
I'm interested that in your Instagram profile, you describe it as historical living.
Thanks. Yeah, I would say that happened more recently. I've always been interested in history, and mostly I would say anything within the 18th and 19th centuries. That's always been something that has piqued my interest, and it's probably something that I'll never be able to fully explain why I like it. I started researching our family's ancestry several years ago and followed that and have done like all the DNA testing. And that really triggered a lot more of me researching into different time periods and how they lived. And I think if I could do anything, other than what I'm doing right now, I would probably become a domestic historian, because I just find it fascinating what the average person did and mostly what the average woman would do in her day-to-day life.
Have you ever watched a Victorian farm or the Edwardian farm on Amazon?
Yes.
That sounds like up your
I
alley.
love it. That's like my middle of the afternoon. I need my second cup of coffee for the day, and I'm going to sit and watch this.
It's a fascinating show. I watched a few, but it's not very cliffhanging. I trailed off easily. But for someone who's specifically interested in just day-to-day activities in the 1800s, then yeah.
Yeah, that's the trouble with those shows. They have to make up problems so that you'll come back. But if there's, if it's just day to day, then yeah.
Also, what I found interesting about specifically the Victorian one, and I might be remembering this wrong because it's been a while since I watched it, but the woman who was supposed to be the one kind of cooking and tending to the hearth, she actually didn't know anything about cooking in general, and she was just sort of, this is what they cooked, and I could tell because I love cooking. It was kind of a disconnect. How cool would it be if there's actually someone generally knew about a kitchen now? Because they're actually historians. They're PhD academia people and not farm people.
And it just assigned them the roles.
Yeah.
So she got the cook role.
Yeah.
I would still love to know, I think her name is Ruth, how she got that title of domestic historian.
Yes.
Like what classes or courses did you have to take and everything to get that title? I just find that fascinating. I would love to know what she looked at.
I think that's something you could probably just claim for yourself.
I mean, you just did. And I was like, yeah, that's
you call yourself a domestic historian because you are, and then you sort of just grow further into it. And so, we can introduce you. Here's Kayla Lobermeier, our domestic historian.
Oh my gosh.
Do you have a book called The Year 1000?
Oh yeah, it's so cool.
Have you seen that book? I bought it in a museum store in France, actually, a few years ago. I was seeing the Bayeux Tapestry. I think it was in that museum. Because the Bayeux Tapestries are around, it's like 1100 or something. But it's called The Year 1000, and it goes through every aspect of life, literally what it was like to be a human in 1000. And it's fascinating.
That sounds incredible.
Yeah.
I would love to read that.
We were having a discussion on podcast just a couple of weeks ago. We were talking to Heidi Barr of Kitchen Garden Textiles about plastic in the kitchen. And we got into this thing about it hasn't been very long, just a couple of generations since women didn't have plastic in the kitchen and all the storage and everything. Yeah. So I'm sure that you try to exercise as much plastic free as you can manage. So if you are replicating historical practices in the kitchen, talk to us about that.
I try to. I definitely use a lot of modern conveniences like machines and things like that. Sure. I use a KitchenAid mixer. I don't mix all of my loaves of bread by hand. That would be ridiculous. Mostly because I have a 9-month-old and a 6-year-old, and it does save me time. So I will lean into those. As far as plastic goes, we don't use a lot of it. Mostly I've gotten rid of plastic wrap for a long time, and I've had to bring it back in mostly because of COVID and me selling baked goods in our store.
Yeah.
I have to have them individually packaged, and that's a bummer. and I can't really sell a packaged beeswax wrap muffin to somebody. So
that would be a really expensive muffin.
Yeah, or I'll unwrap it gently for you and hand it off. So I do have plastic wrap in my house, but yeah, beeswax wrap, I do use that like for our things. A towel works really well too for like covering a bowl or something. You don't use that. And then I guess a lot of our Tupperware, I have ceramic Tupperware that people bought us for our wedding. It's just like little things that I've collected, or I'll use a bowl cover or something. But our plastic Tupperware is minimal, and the ones that we do have, I try to use them as much as possible, get the full life out of it. And I mostly use it for the freezer storage. I just haven't found anything better than plastic. And I would love to use, I've seen people use reusable freezer bags, but based on how much food that I produce and just from our garden and the farm and things that I preserve, it's just difficult. So I'm definitely not a voice to teach you how to do that, because I still don't know myself, just because of the expense mostly in buying as many reusable containers that I would need. I mean, I've been collecting them over time. So yeah, in terms of other methods of cooking, I do try to do more historical things and choose historical inspired recipes and then make them more modernized so that they're easier. If you pick up like a Fanny Farmer cookbook, the original published one, they don't really give you measurements for what to use.
Oh.
They're just like a pinch of this and a little bit of that and make it work. It'll come together, don't worry. So I try to use those and manipulate it and try to figure out how to make it easier for people now to understand how to use.
That's so interesting that the original Fanny Farmer doesn't give precise measurements. Is there anything else that stands out as kind of a big difference? I remember when we were in Williamsburg several years ago, one of the guides had said that the desserts from the 18th century, I guess they were probably recipes from England because it was colonial Williamsburg, just had tons and tons of butter and sugar. Have you found that?
Oh, yeah, I'm sure they did. I love Colonial Williamsburg. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
So fun. Yeah. Well, things then would not have had the leavening agents that we have now. Baking powder and baking soda weren't as popular to use. I don't think that would have been until like the mid 19th century that would have really been commercially produced to leaven your cakes and muffins or quick breads, banana bread, that kind of thing. So a lot of desserts would have been really heavy, and I'm sure butter and sugar would have helped improve the flavor and taste of that.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I guess sugar was a real commodity back then, and in colonial Williamsburg, that probably represented the upper class segment of society, and they could probably, afford a lot of sugar, and maybe it spoke to their wealth or something if they had, a lot of elaborate sweets.
For sure.
I just remember that. I remember that stands out in my head from one of those tours, and they were, they had all this food set out examples, and there was these gorgeous desserts.
Yes, I think you're absolutely right. And it would have been a direct import, I'm sure, from like the Caribbean and everything like that. So I do remember going there and they had like sipping chocolate that you could have.
Yeah.
And it's so bitter because there's no sugar in it. It's just that dark cocoa powder, and it's very different. But yeah, I don't think a lot of what they ate was sweetened. I think too, one of the more fascinating things is that you assume, hundreds of years ago, they ate these organic, amazing vegetable dishes and went outside and got in the dirt, and there weren't pesticides or any of the modern things that we have now that we're trying to avoid. And I love learning that people then really didn't eat vegetables because they didn't want to put the labor into growing a garden. It was too much work, same as it is now. So they mostly ate starches. They would eat like bread, and then they'd eat meat and cheese and things that were easy. And it's the same now. So nothing's really changed. Now we just have things on our food that we don't want.
You're defining my ideal diet. Bread, meat, cheese.
Yeah.
That's literally what I eat when I'm lazy.
That's interesting. Are you talking about 18th, 19th century, that kind of time period, the sort of homestead era of America?
Yes.
40 acres and a mule people, like they weren't out there growing vegetable gardens. They just had their meat and potatoes and stuff. Is that sort of what you're saying?
Yes. So, like the people in Colonial Williamsburg, they have the beautiful gardens there, but the average person that lived in a small town like that, they had a garden for show, but they weren't really going out there and eating from it. It's too much work.
I also imagine there being a class difference between whether or not you have the help to be the garden person and the cook person. And if you're literally doing everything on your own, as I'm sure most of us can relate to this these days, it is a lot.
Yeah.
It is.
I look back and wonder at all the work it took to process an animal. You know, the pig in the fall, the pig slaughter in the fall, that would include the whole neighborhood and the whole family. And it took a couple of days of, a bunch of people on specific jobs. And so that was the meat. And I guess the meat was, in those situations, was kind of seen as the main thing. Or you would process a cow or a venison or something. So if you had that was the basic, and if you had your corn and potatoes or whatever. So it kind of makes sense.
It does. We're about to do that this fall. We're going to butcher a few pigs ourselves.
Oh, really?
Yeah. My friend that does the GAP certified hogs, we told her, like, we purchase a hog off of her, and the butchers are so booked up the past 2 years.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, it's insane, which is good. That means a lot of people want to get in on homegrown meat. I love that. So anyway, we were like, well, could we just buy a few piglets off of you and raise them ourselves? And they're like, yeah, you can go for it. So they walked us through it, and we have 4 pigs over at the farm. And then September, October, whenever they're ready, my dad, me, and then one of his friends, we're going to kind of have a friendly competition to see who can do like the best cuts, but we're going to butcher them ourselves. And oh my gosh, I'm nervous. But yeah, we're just going to try it. And thankfully, his friend is a hunter and kind of understands the process. So it should go okay. I'm just not sure we're going to have butcher quality cuts off of.
That's amazing. I'm very impressed because I've never actually slaughtered a chicken. I have observed the chicken processing process. I know about the rabbit situation. That's actually a very clean one. I'm not sure I could do a pig.
It'll be difficult.
So I commend you. Yes, because they're so smart.
Yeah.
They're like having a dog.
Yeah.
Really. And we've done chickens for a couple of years now. And that is easier. It was really difficult the very first time that we did it. And aside from taking the life of an animal, which is difficult in its own right, I was so nervous about the evisceration process.
Yeah.
I really hope that I don't contaminate this meat and something goes wrong. And yes, so the pig will be a feat of its own, but I think we'll be okay.
Yeah. These things are so unimaginable for us now, and it's so crazy that you're doing that. But literally, as a human race, we've been doing this for as long as we've been on the planet.
Yeah, it's been so recent that we haven't done it.
Yeah, that we're so disconnected from it.
Yeah.
It just blows my mind.
Yeah.
And it wasn't that long, maybe early in the 20th century, before they had, before the benefit of refrigeration to process the meat and put it up and keep it all year. It would be a big fall thing. Right when the weather started turning cold is when you would slaughter the pig and have this neighborhood event.
Oh, that's why it's in the fall. That makes sense.
Yeah. I grew up in Northeast Tennessee, which is southern Appalachia, so to speak, and heard about all these things. I am not of the age that these things were common, but they still existed to a certain extent.
Sure.
At that time in the 60s and 70s. Some people are still doing it. They're not doing it much anymore.
But it was like a party. It was like an event.
It would be like an event, like a community thing, and the hog slaughter. And people would have their jobs making it happen. It was kind of like sort of assembly line sort of thing.
I love it.
That's what you guys are doing.
Well, just you talking about that's really what everything I write about and everything that I share and do and just enjoy doing in real life. I mean, online persona aside, that's why I want to do it.
For the community.
It is about food, but it's more so about community.
Yeah.
And I think that we're missing that as a society now.
Yeah.
How incredible is that to get the entire neighborhood together to just help do something meaningful, and all the conversation, all the things that you learn. And you get to go home with something that, I mean, it's kind of sad.
Yeah.
But also it's really good.
Also, it's important
because
for life. Like everyone needs
yes.
food.
Yeah, and there was another community activity that we would hear about where people would get together and process the beans. There was a certain kind of bean that would be dried, and they would get together and have a party and string it up, put a needle and thread on it, and have these long strings of beans. And you would hang them up in your house or your barn or whatever, and they would dry. And so,
Is that why they're called string beans?
oh, they're called string beans because a lot of the varieties of the beans had little strings that you'd have to actually remove to cook. But I think locally in the area where I grew up, they were called shucky beans.
Okay.
I don't know. I mean, that could have been a super local term. They would get together and have a party and do this food preservation activity and then,
I love it.
Share the food.
We do something similar every September. The farm has about 10 mature apple trees on it.
Mm.
And we get together with our neighbors who really become our family. My extended family has never been very close. It's always just kind of been me and my parents. So I feel like they kind of adopted us, which I love it. It's so nice. But anyway, we get together and press apple cider.
Oh, I love it.
Oh,
every
my gosh.
September. And it's a whole process. We all sit around. We all dice up the apples, remove the core, prep them, make sure none of them are rotten. And then somebody is going in and strains it out. And yeah, we all have our roles and it's really fun. And then we always have like a big potluck at the end. So that's really fun too.
And do you ferment it?
I want to this year. I fermented cider, but I haven't fermented apple cider vinegar. I'm looking forward to that this year.
Okay.
Oh, here's another one. And this is in my memory, in my life. I was pretty young when we did this, but we went to at least an event where they would churn the molasses and there would be a mule.
Oh my gosh.
That was walking around this big barrel that was over a fire and churning the molasses and churning in. And the product was sorghum or sorghum, as they said in East Tennessee.
How cool is that?
So did you have to partake?
No, you just went.
That's awesome.
You would have sorghum on your biscuits. And
oh, that sounds good.
so there was a lot of that kind of culture where I grew up, and a lot of it exists today, but they will replicate it.
Yeah. It's funny too how even just now talking about it, it seems so romantic and lovely community.
A lot of work.
There's a lot of sweating.
Yeah. And also one day probably soon, or even not that long, such a necessary part of life.
Oh,
like I think about that a lot. The kinds of things that we think of now, even just berry picking, on a summer afternoon, it feels like a privilege to be able to go pick berries, but it's not that long ago. And also maybe not that far in the future. It's what you have to do.
Yeah, you have to get the berries to eat.
Yeah, if you want them, you have to go get them.
Yeah.
Well, back to the hog killing thing, that was the basis of your survival for the year, was to process that hog and to have the meat in reserve for many, many months to come. I want to circle back to something you said about your friend raising the GAPS certified pig. Is that GAPS diet you hear about? And what does that mean?
It's the Global Animal Protection Certification. I believe it's what it's called.
Okay. Does that mean they're well treated? What does that mean? I think that's interesting.
It means so they are raised in, it's called like a hoop house. Mm-hmm. They're technically still on concrete, but they have hay bedding that's changed out daily. And it's half protect, like this half of the hoop house is protected. And then the other side is open air. And I mean, the whole thing's pretty much open air. There's airflow going in both ways. So it's like the step in between a confinement hog and a pastured hog. Mm-hmm. And then the GAP certification is they can't make any physical changes to the pig. So they can't like remove tails or anything like that you would normally have in a confinement. And the reason for that is they don't want too many animals packed in one space. So the animals have plenty of space between. There's not a whole bunch of pigs packed into this stall. Mm-hmm. So then they don't have that. Well, I guess, yeah, in confinement, they bite each other's tails off because they're so close together and they're bored and it's just
stressed.
Not a fun, yes. So they have plenty of space and they have a pretty decent and nicely treated life up until their last day. And I believe that they're antibiotic and hormone free and all that kind of stuff. So.
Interesting. Is that if you don't have the pasture space? Why would someone opt for that instead of a pastured animal?
Yeah, I've talked to so many just local people about this, and I think it's mostly a debate on the amount of animals that you can produce within a timely fashion to make back the money that you need to actually make a living off of it. Mm-hmm. which stinks. It stinks that that's the system.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's mostly that, because with the confinement building, you can produce hundreds of pigs in one go and sell all of them. And there you go. You've made this huge cash prize and a decent income because they were a lot cheaper to raise.
Mm-hmm.
This, you're taking another step and being like, well, they're more expensive to raise. I can't raise as many.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not really making a great income. And then on pasture, you could say like, well, you have this huge open pasture, but that costs money too. And
yeah, it does seem the economics of it. It's interesting. I didn't even know that in between existed.
Well, the difference is these things come from our history of homesteading, where people were producing food mainly for themselves or extended family anyway, trying to feed less people. So the scale was so much less. Now, people are trying to make a living out of it and, selling more. So the economics clicks in big time. So, and as we all are aware, when you get into really large scale, you get into all kinds of problems with the CAFOs and the industrial meat and antibiotics and all of those things. So we want there to be a way for people, we're not anywhere near the number of people homesteading that we used to be, and nor that's not possible or maybe even desirable. I mean, that's the thing in the past where everybody's growing their own food, right?
Yes, that's the issue.
Yeah.
For sure. And the issue is that it's not realistic.
Right.
Yeah.
You could even go, again, this is going back to like talking about the Victorian era, growing vegetables, but they didn't really do that.
Yeah.
You just feel like they did, or you think they did. And I mean, what did people that lived in urban settings do? They didn't raise a pig in their backyard.
Yeah.
It's the same as it is now in ways. And I think there's a big discussion on if we got rid of confinements and conventional farming, if we just got rid of it, we couldn't feed the whole world then.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if I'm the most knowledgeable person on that, but it does make me wonder, like, but what did we do before?
Yeah.
That?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Obviously, we were doing okay.
Not everybody.
Right. Not everybody.
You'd have bad weather or
Yeah.
some animal would kill your pig.
Right.
You'd have the potato famine. It's a great example.
Yeah. Or your cow would
Yes.
die. For those of us growing up watching the Waltons, you should watch the Waltons. Have you done it?
I don't think I ever have.
You
No.
would love that show.
You've heard of it. Have you heard of it?
Yes.
Okay.
My mom's talked about it. Is that the like Goodnight John
Night,
Boy?
John Boy.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
So they had a little homestead, and it, you saw like how important was that cow, and if something
Yes.
happened to the cow.
And we're doing the same thing. There are so many issues that happen on a homestead
Yeah.
that people just don't realize. And then when you post about them online, you get a lot of flack for that because people are just not used to seeing it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
People getting upset that we have cats outside or something.
Oh,
It's
dear.
like, but yeah, just silly things. But when I lived in the city, I kind of thought the same way.
Mhm.
So I get it. It's confusing. And the nice thing is that we are very privileged that we can go to the
Mhm.
grocery store when something
Yeah.
goes wrong.
Yeah.
And I guess if you fully circled back on that, you could say like, okay, well, if that didn't exist, could you just make do with it?
Right.
What would really happen if you couldn't get out? But I do think that this past year with COVID really
Yeah.
showed us that,
Yeah.
like, okay, what can we manage with and without this year and just produce on our own so we don't have to go out at all.
And that's why the slaughterhouses are all booked now.
Yeah.
Mostly, yeah. It is so interesting. And it is such a circular discussion because we don't necessarily want to go back to before refrigeration and all of that.
Yes.
But there's something to be said for all of the amazing conveniences of modern life and the problems that that causes. So maybe it comes down to like figuring out, like you just said, what can we make do? Is that settling?
Yes.
So interesting.
It's a confusing discussion for sure. And yeah, you could say that there's no way that we could live without the grocery store because we would all starve and die. It's like, but the grocery store is also killing us.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
which is worse?
Yeah.
That's so true.
And
Yeah.
And we had this really interesting conversation on another podcast. We were talking about the whole idea of homesteading, this whole idea of self-sufficiency. And there's just really too many of us. There's just no way that everybody could be self-sufficient on their own land. There's not enough land. There's not enough resources. And what we really need is
Communities.
self-sufficient communities.
Yeah.
Thus the emphasis on local, because you have people people doing things that you aren't necessarily set up to do, but they're close by, and therefore then it's not part of the big industrialized system and all those things. It's an interesting conundrum. And, we talk about the fiber shed, same thing, gets into with textiles and clothing.
Yeah.
I've noticed on your Instagram feed, you seem to have, sometimes you have historical clothing, or do you make those things? And
some of the things I do make, I'm learning to sew. My mom is more of the seamstress, and then her mom is an excellent seamstress, very talented. So I'm teaching myself right now how to sew clothing. And then I work with a company called Little Women Atelier.
I follow them. I love them.
Yes. So they've been sending me pieces to share. And that was kind of my goal for 2021, was to just transition over into sharing historical inspired things and change the way I was dressing, which is, I feel like, is how I started off with social media and our blog. I was really inspired by historical living, and I ended up talking with I had a few opportunities for television shows come up, which all fell through, obviously, but they wanted it to be more of a commercial feel. I guess I can just say I was interviewed with the Magnolia Network.
Oh.
That would have been in summer of 2019. So they just came out with all of their new shows, which I love them. They're beautiful, but they are more of that. It's a commercial style. Everybody's kind of dressed the same. Mm-hmm. Everybody's doing the same thing. And when they interviewed me, they were asking well, what are some situations that could happen with your business? I'm like, I don't really know, which is probably why I didn't get the show.
Like in Victorian Farm, you're like, what drama could we make? I break a canning jar.
Yes. What are some issues that would pop up?
Oh, see, they're trying to create tension.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm like, we don't really have that. We're pretty happy. So.
Oh, that won't do.
Yeah. And they were trying to see if I would go out and build a garden for somebody else. I'm like, I don't really do that. I just do this CSA and people come and get vegetables from me. And now with COVID happening, it was I just don't want to do that.
Yeah.
Even if it means I'm not going to grow as quickly as I thought I was going to. So yeah, I feel like I just kind of came into my own. And now that mom is doing the flower farm and I just kind of have free reign to do what I want with the blog and our Instagram, I'm really just kind of having at it and having fun with it again.
No, good for you. And you know that will circle back and they'll say, okay, now we want to make a show, whatever you want it to be. Don't fit into people's. Yeah. I'm so proud of you. That's so cool.
I really admire you for staying in touch with what you're trying to do, because that would be so tempting.
Yeah.
To fit their template just for exposure.
Yeah.
One might think, oh, I'll get the exposure and then I can just go on and do my thing. But I'm sure it's a little more involved.
And then you would end up making, probably at the end of the day, it would come out and it would be not you. And that would feel so weird to be misrepresented.
I would hate to see my family arguing fakely with each other on television. Yeah. That would not feel right.
That's so funny.
Yeah.
Really interested in what your day looks like. What's the day in the life of Kayla of Under a Tin Roof? And at the same time, what are the biggest challenges and the things you love to do the most?
So lately I've been getting up between 4 and 5 in the morning, and I'll come down and I'll start baking for this new business, which will eventually be a food truck. There's no food truck yet. Eventually we want to have this fully functioning kitchen where I can cook whatever I want, lunch, dinner, farm to table style meals. So right now I'm trying to get away with what I can legally without having a commercial kitchen, which would be the cottage food laws, which can sell most standard baked goods, things that can't be refrigerated, that sort of thing. So I'll get up in the morning. I will have probably 2 cups of coffee, maybe 3, and just try to wake myself up. My children will still be sleeping. And lately my husband is a chemistry professor, so he's had the last month off of school. So he's been helping me out, and he'll take the kids when they wake up and hang out with them. And I'll have baked bread or some sort of baked good that I'm going to put into the store. And once everybody's up and moving, I've been up for a few hours already. And I guess in that time, I'll usually answer emails or write a little bit or plan out what I'm going to post for the day. And once everybody wakes up, then I'll make breakfast, and I try to cook from scratch every day. That's probably, if I'm going to be strict about anything being sustainable, it's going to be that. So
Wow.
I try to cook absolutely everything that we eat from scratch, and I love doing it. And when we talked about starting this business, that was kind of my motivation for like, I'm not sick of it. It's been 7 years and I'm still cooking everything from scratch. I mean, I've learned new things now and easier ways, but I don't like get tired of it at the end of the day. And I don't get tired of hosting or feeding everybody. Like that's what makes me keep going throughout the day. And we'll have something simple. We'll have like fried eggs and toast or bacon if we have it, that sort of thing. And then if it's nice out, we'll take a walk to the park in the morning, and my older son can get some energy out. And I can hang out with the baby for a little bit, and we'll come home and I'll clean up. I'll probably post to Instagram, and I try really hard. I feel like I probably don't do Instagram the way that everybody else does, which is why growth has been slow for so long, because I try to really not be on there.
Same.
Yeah.
Actually,
Same
we
with us.
feel very similarly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Just make that decision. You're not going to feed the beast all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, I go on and I try to answer comments often, but I try to look at it as more like me answering a text message. I will do that, but I'm not going to sit and scroll. So I probably don't interact enough or very well with other accounts. So yeah, I'll post for the day and I'll answer back comments, but other than that, I'm not really on my phone. I'm working on stuff. So I'll be in the afternoons, like we'll have lunch and maybe watch a show. I'm not going to say my kids never watch television. Mostly I'm like, go play, please. So go find something to do. And we'll go out in the garden together, or I'll work on a craft. And if I'm like sewing, or I like to knit when it's cold out, which is not convenient because you want the things that you're knitting.
Yeah, exactly.
Or any of those little projects. Like the other day I was braiding, I picked all the onions and braided onions on the dining room table. So then my older son wants to come in and help.
Cool.
So we'll do stuff like that together. And, you know, it doesn't always go great. I will definitely get frustrated. And so our life is not like charmingly perfect or anything like that. And then by the time it's late afternoon, I'll start making dinner. The baby naps a couple times in between there. Nursing, that happens. So it's just like this big jumble of stuff. And then if I'm going to work out in the garden, I try to do it in the evening when it's cool off. But this garden I feel like I haven't really been outside this year, mostly because it's been so hot.
Oh, yeah.
Ridiculously hot. But then I planted a raised bed garden, which I've only done raised beds one other time. And I didn't make any work for myself. It feels really weird. I just like kind of go out there and I'm like, there's nothing to do. There's no weeds to pull. I mean, there's some, but it's not anything living. When I was on the farm planting in ground, and the weeds are just like constantly coming up and taking over. And that's all you're focused on.
Yeah.
So yeah, this year, and everything's growing really slowly compared to years past. And I'm wondering if that has something to do with the heat.
I'm sure.
It's been a really strange growing season. So I feel like I go out there and I'm like, when are you going to be ready for me to do something? And then I sit and I feel guilty because I'm not posting anything about it, which is like one of my main gigs. Let's go.
I want to show those preserves.
Yeah.
You said you have a sizable garden. Are your parents still on the farm?
Yes. They're on the farm. My mom has been doing the flower farm all on her own this year. So I was pregnant last summer, and my youngest was born in October. So middle of the summer, I was large and in charge and not very helpful. So she kind of just ended up figuring out how to do it on her own. And yeah, this year she was like, I just got it. And that's what they plan to do in their retirement. My dad is still working. And then my mom has just always had her own business and did the same thing I do. Stay-at-home mom for me worked on her little side business as a, extra income. And yeah, she's really loving it. I'm so proud of her. I mean, I answer a lot of gardening questions, but I really haven't been out there working. I've been out there, to visit and drink coffee and stuff.
Yeah. That sounds similar to me. It's about a 40-minute drive to her farm, and I live here in town, so it sounds similar.
Yeah. This is kind of the time of year when the garden is at a point. Yeah, there's always weeds to pull, but it's almost like you start saying, well, what does it matter now?
Yeah. It's gotten this far. You're fine.
Yeah. And I notice it every year. I notice that there's this, this arc of things that, need to be done. And then it just starts tapering off like right about now. Like I think we just crested the hill where at the end of the season, it's not really in sight, but you're starting to think about it a little bit. And in November, all this stuff's going to be frozen and brown. And I don't need to worry too much about pulling all that out right now.
You're feeding the bees or something, right?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. And, fertilizing the soil because.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. So you love the baking and the cooking from scratch. That's what you feel like feeds you and keeps you going in this whole project, huh?
Absolutely.
And tell us about your business, your burgeoning business.
Want to hear about that?
Yeah. When I first found out I was pregnant unexpectedly, my parents, at first I was like, I'm just going to go back to school, probably like after the baby's born and figure out what I'm going to do from there. And I had only ever really worked in the food industry through high school and worked as like a waitress and then worked in the kitchen and did that. And I had always loved cooking at home. I wasn't really cooking great things at the time. I didn't know as much as I do now, but I was still cooking from scratch, just not the best ingredients. And my parents were like, well, why don't you try to do a food truck? That would be kind of cool. And they were kind of, I guess I shouldn't say new, but new to us at the time. This would have been in 2014, 2015. Mm-hmm. And we were living in Texas. My dad had gotten a job down there. So I finished my senior year of high school and we were in another very urban area. They had me kind of recreate the menu of the restaurant that I had been working in at home. And I served it to all of us. And we sat there and we were like, we can do it. It would work out. And I just kind of kept putting it off. I don't know if I really want to like work in a food truck with a baby. That sounds really difficult. And I just didn't have the passion behind it because I didn't know enough about it. So then, years passed and I'm still cooking and doing all of these things with food. And I'm just ended up sharing recipes instead. And I guess it's been 3 or 4 years now that I just have been pestering at my family members. Like, what if we opened a restaurant? What if we turned the store into a restaurant? What if there was like a little bakery in town that ended up catching fire and got shut down? And it's like the only bakery in town that sold donuts and everybody is like, we want donuts back in town. I'm like, what if we bought the bakery? And it's too far gone. So that didn't work out. And yeah, so it's just been within the past like 6 months that my husband is like, yeah, I think it's time. Let's move forward with this. And this will be kind of a fun sneak peek, but my parents came at me a couple of months ago and said, so we have this full acre field and only like a quarter of it is planted right now. So the rest just has turned into grass. We want to build a few little cottages out there and turn them into Airbnbs so people can come. And they found this thing where people are like coming and I guess you'd call it glamping on the farm. And they come and they would have like a little campfire and they could stay in the cottage and cook out there. And they're like, and then, if you wanted to like do the food truck on the farm, then people could come and eat and stay. I'm like, okay, that sounds good. That's and my husband was like, yeah, let's do it. So now we're just kind of trying to find a food truck. And the type of food truck I want with a full kitchen in it is pricey, obviously.
That sounds like a fantastic idea. And I want to ask you about, let's say you've got the food truck up and going and you've got everything the way you want it. So what are your standards? I know you love to cook from scratch. Do you have like a standard for ingredients? Are they locally grown? Or are they not necessarily certified organic, but organically grown? What are you going to insist on for the most part when you have this?
Yeah, that's the goal, is to do locally grown. If it's organic, that's better. Yeah. It'll just kind of depend on what's available to us. Yeah. So the goal is to do from scratch and do prairie 19th century Little House on the Prairie, I guess I would say, Anna Green Gables inspired food. So just old fashioned food that
Great.
people, you might eat now, but it's going to be stepped up a little bit. And we just actually had a farm supper last night. We invited a group of our friends and decided like, okay, we're just going to try to go through kind of the idea of how we want this to operate, and tried it out. And it was so fun. Oh, it was wonderful. So we did a 6-course meal, and it all got brought out in little servings so that you weren't getting like a ton of food the whole time. And yeah, my dad and I got to work in the kitchen again like we used to, and all brought it out, served to them. And at the end, they got to go out and cut flowers at the farm. So
Cute.
it was so cute. And it was so wonderful. I got that. My mom calls it a show high after going to like one of her art shows.
Yeah.
And like, this was so fun and I can't wait to do it again. And I was like, I finally felt that way after a really long time, because I love writing and I love social media, but it's just not the same. I feel like it can really just like beat you down.
Yeah,
and
it's really draining.
Yes, this was like going outside and hearing how wonderful it was. And I can't wait to tell other people about it. Oh my gosh, that was just so nice. Yeah, so I think what we're going to try to do is do like a supper club to get away with not having a commercial kitchen right now.
Yeah.
And have people pay by donation to come, and we'll just see if we can get some people out. But I had a few people message me like, I want to come do that. I'm like, really? Okay. That sounds good to me.
And when are your parent camp situation? When's that going to be?
They're hoping by spring of 2022.
Oh,
yeah.
boy.
Wow, well, we can't wait to come visit. That sounds awesome.
Come to Iowa.
Yeah,
camp.
come visit.
When you were talking about like the kind of food you wanted to serve, I just thought, ooh, shepherd's pie. I can just see, a stewy kind of something with a crust. And oh gosh, it sounds so good. It's making me hungry.
So what does the good dirt mean to you? Metaphorically or literally or both?
I would think about it as more literally, that it would be like everything coming full circle, or the full life cycle. And that's a big motivator for me for all the things we do. I like seeing things come out of nothing and go through all the steps to get there. I feel like a chicken is a really good example for that. Raising it, feeding it, doing all the steps to take care of the chicken, going in and butchering it and then preserving it and then cooking it and then starting all over again. And I think if you're talking about soil or dirt in particular, it's the same thing. It's going in, feeding the soil with the compost, the plants from the year past, planting a new seed, watching it grow, watching it die, going in and composting it and coming back. That's just an incredible experience to go through. And I've done it for several years now, and it never gets boring.
This sort of just popped in my head, and this is kind of non sequitur, but I think we've sort of both hinted at it all through this conversation. But there's something interesting about doing the work that both of us do, which is sort of illuminating this lifestyle and sharing this simple life and sort of hearkening back to tradition, but also wrestling with what that means in the modern day, and also relying on the internet and social media to like get our work out there, but also that being something that's really kind of draining and goes against everything that we want to be doing and thinking about. So I'd be interested in any of your thoughts about just that, the way that those two things exist in your work and in your world. The question that came to my head was, I wonder what she thinks about Cottagecore, like that like hashtag, because I feel like you would be like, Peg does that, but also it bothers me because it feels like it's a label attached to something that's like thing that
I can't knock the Cottagecore label, because I totally use the hashtag to get people to come and see things, and it's helped grow a little bit. I get that. I think I also see a lot of people that are 100% cottagecore, and I basically invented the word and the concept for it that I follow online. And cottagecore does not mean like you're on a homestead and farming. And I'm like, okay, but does it mean you're just romanticizing that? It's confusing. And I agree with you. I think it's just a label, and it's a way to group together certain things about a simple lifestyle that you enjoy. I have seen other people say that cottagecore too is we're about positively enjoying nature and promoting the natural world. And I'm like, okay, so I guess that means posing with a butterfly is. And it's the same things that I like to dress in. I think For me, I've been struggling a lot with social media for this past year, calendar year. I thought I was going to go in and be like, this is going to be the best year ever. I'm going to grow a ton. Last year was so great with gardening and canning because everybody was on board. And this year I just feel like it's went down, especially more on the gardening side.
Interesting.
So everybody's getting back to their normal lives again, which is fine. And it's kind of back to like, okay, homesteading's like, it's cool, but I'm not really going to do it. And that's how I feel. Most of my followers are, and most of them are from urban cities and all over the world, nowhere close, nothing local. I've been so drained this year, and I've had embarrassingly emotional moments where I'm like, why am I even doing this? Like, what is the point? And if I'm being honest, it all goes back to making an income.
Yeah.
Which, I don't know. I think people can go online and look at an influencer and just nitpick their personal lives so much. And sometimes I look at other people's, this is the reason why I'm here. And it's this like really deep, meaningful thing. And I'm like, but you're also making money. And for me, it is a lot about making money. I do enjoy posting and I do enjoy all of the things that I do. I'm starting to get to the point where I'm like, I'm American dreaming this and I'm picking at it until I'm trying to figure out what's left that I actually like about it because I'm trying to figure out how to make my income. And mainly the income that I do make is based off of the influencing work that I do. So there's that whole issue, and that is very draining. And it's not necessarily super difficult work either. It's more or less me trying to keep up with the Joneses, I think is what it is. And me coming in and saying like, okay, here's my list of 100 things that I thought of that I want to post for the month of August. And I just can't get to all of it on my own. I can do it in real life, but then me documenting it and like turning it into a video it's exhausting and it's defeating.
Yeah. I think it's changing. Maybe that's just me being optimistic, but I think it's like, I think people are catching on and over it. And I mean, we definitely are. We're trying to lean more on our Almanac, our paid online community, because we got to a point where we're like, we would rather serve our community than pander to try to get people to pay us, so for brands and stuff. So, and granted, I know everything looks amazing on Instagram, but it's all a lot of work, right? And
it is all a lot
getting
of work.
people to join a community and everything. That's a whole other thing. It's not like it's easy and we've cracked a code. It's actually harder.
Yeah.
But it feels good to not be reliant on this ever-changing monster of a thing that this is probably getting into the conversation you said about the small business. Like, we can't compete with the like hefties of the world who can spend $150,000 on a sponsored campaign on Facebook.
Yeah.
It's just crazy.
You talk about cracking the code. I don't know it as well as people y'all's age do, but it seems it's like being at the carnival and trying to do one of those games where the duck is always moving. You're taking these pot shots. And you might hit one every now and then again, but the overall investment that you put into all the chances to shoot really don't add up. So it's ever changing and it's insatiable. It's just insatiable.
And it's like super designed that way.
Yeah.
Well, like in my age, if I want to make a pie or something, which I love to do, or bake bread or something, I don't want to like be having to photograph the whole thing. And plus I get terrible internet at the farm and it's a struggle and I get mad instead of just having fun baking bread.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's been my internal struggle for years.
Yeah, it's fun to make bread, but hey, I've got my hands in the dough. I can't handle the camera too. So I'm just going to bake bread.
Yeah. And I just love you describing that supper that you just had.
Yeah.
And also, I always have to say this when I feel like hating on social media forever, like it does connect you. Like we wouldn't have found you.
Right. Because I'm sitting here complaining about it and I'm like, I don't know, in somebody else's eyes, I'm maybe doing really well. And, I still need it to get my business to operate. So,
I think it boils down to this. We need to use social media in a way that helps us and not have social media using us in a way that helps it.
Yeah.
And you just have to find that thing. And I'm like, for the podcast, for instance, like, oh my gosh, there's endless podcast guests on Instagram, and what would we do? Where would we find people? It's so much fun, and you can go and you can find a whole bunch about them before you even reach out to them, so that's really cool. And then you make these connections. And so, there's a lot about it that's really good. It's just when it reaches the point where you're beating the head against the wall about how to jump through the next hoop that they've created, which is by design as well. Everybody's going, oh no, now they do this and now they do that.
It comes back to real community and real life and being able to create that around yourself. Because at the end of the day, I think that's all we have. And online community is great, but also I think focusing locally and focusing on the people around you and families and self-made family and all of that, that's what makes you feel good.
Virtual community's great. And we've made some awesome connections virtually. People we consider really good friends. So I'm not knocking that either. It's just a lot to sort through.
It is.
It's not black and white. For sure.
No, it's not. And I'm really appreciative of where it's gotten us. And you do get that, little hit of joy and satisfaction when somebody comes in and likes your things.
Yeah.
And that's addicting. And I'm not going to say that I don't enjoy that, because why would I be there if I didn't?
Yeah.
So it's a double-edged sword. And the thing that I've learned, which I agree with you too about your community, and I've tried that. I've tried to do like interactive courses where I was available all the time for people, and that it's a lot of work. So I commend you for that. That's incredible. Yeah. I think what I'm starting to realize, and maybe I'll figure out by the end of this year, is that I just need to start posting because it's what I want to talk about and what I enjoy, and not thinking so much about like what's going to get the most engagement.
Yeah.
And I think if we are posting with something that we authentically want to share and it gives us joy to share, and there are those moments, like, oh, I want to show people this beautiful flower or whatever, then I think on some level that comes across, and it can only help us.
Yeah.
I think people for sure can tell.
Thank you so much, Kayla. We feel sure that people can tell what you are doing is from a place of authenticity and a deep desire to share meaningful ways of slowing down, enjoying wonderful food made from scratch, beautiful things grown and made and worn, and past traditions that can still bring joy to our lives. We love what you're doing, and we so appreciate your willingness to share in such a great conversation with us today.
Yes, thank you, Kayla. Thank you, Good Dirt listeners, for supporting us. Thank you, Almanac members, for being a part. We had a Almanac gathering last night, and it was just so heartwarming. I love everyone who comes to those gatherings. It's always so fun. So please be a part if you're not yet. We would welcome you. Check out our retreat online, ladyfarmer.com. It's under events, and we are just so excited about everything. Thank you for being here. We'll see you next week on The Good Dirt.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.